From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Monday, October 6, 2025. The clock is ticking on a Middle East peace deal proposed by US President Donald Trump. Hamas is split on whether to agree to the plan, which would require the militant group to fully disarm, destroy its weapons, and leave Gaza for good. Talks between Hamas and the United States will take place in Egypt on Monday, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he hopes all remaining hostages held in Gaza will be returned in the coming days. Support for Pauline Hanson's One Nation party has almost doubled since the federal election in May, while core support for the coalition is lingering at record lows. That's according to new data from Newspoll, which also says the Albanese Labor government has recorded its strongest primary vote in more than 2 years. You can read our experts' analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au. Japan will usher in its newest Prime Minister in as many years in a matter of weeks. The question is, can Sanae Takaichi, the first woman to be elevated to the top job, hang on to it? That's today's episode. She was so firm and uncompromising in her politics, they called her the Iron Lady. Margaret Thatcher was the longest-serving British Prime Minister of the 20th century and the first woman to hold the position.
It is our purpose to retain the power and influence of this House and not to denude it of many of the powers.
The conservative ideology that drove her policies, and also her unique style, came to be known as Thatcherism, and the people who subscribed to it were dubbed Thatcherites. It's a label 64-year-old Sanae Takaichi bears proudly. A long-time admirer of Thatcher's, Takaichi is the first woman to be elected to lead Japan's conservative Liberal Democratic Party, clearing the way for her to become the country's new Prime Minister in a matter of weeks.
She's very much modelled herself as an inheritor of the Shinzo Abe political tradition in Japan.
Will Glasgow is The Australian's North Asia correspondent.
And she's very much a conservative. She's from that Abe wing of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. But while she's got a lot of the same political instincts or conservative positions as Abe, she's not got anything like the track record of electoral success that Abe has had. Now, she's won this party vote, but there's really a lot of questions about will she actually get very far in prosecuting that case to return to the Abe legacy.
Japan's Liberal Democratic Party has governed almost continuously since its inception in the 1950s. It oversaw Japan's recovery following World War II, turning it into an economic superpower and developing a pro-America foreign policy. Sanae Takaichi is the second party leader to be elected in the space of a year.
Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has moments ago said he is resigning. The decision to step down comes as Ishiba works to avoid a split within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The LDP.
By the time he steps down, there will be 5 former prime ministers from the LDP in the party room when they gather. 5 former, and then this new prime minister. So the churn has returned. So you've had a very turbulent period within the LDP as the factions jostle with one another for who should lead, with no one since Abe resigned, and he was later horrendously assassinated in 2022. But since then, there's just been no one who's been able to assert dominance over Japanese politics in anything like that way and look like they had a firm grip on power. They've always been undermined by some other faction within the party, and at every single election since he stood down, they've performed poorly. So look, in her victory speech after winning the leadership contest on Saturday night, she was very frank that the party's facing a very difficult outlook. She said, rather than feeling happy now, I feel the future is truly difficult. And really every analyst of Japanese politics, all her party members, would agree with that. Her next challenge is to secure support from other minor parties in the Japanese political system. She doesn't need that to become the prime minister. She just needs the most votes when the Japanese parliament, the Diet, meets, most likely in the next fortnight, but it's still to be confirmed by the time we're talking. But then to pass any legislation, her LDP party is going to need the support of minor parties in the Japanese system. And the LDP's natural coalition partner, it's a much more moderate political party, and Takaichi was by far the least popular amongst that minor party. So even the existing coalition agreement that the LDP has, or coalition arrangement at least, even that's looking uncertain. But then those two parties together don't now have enough votes in the lower house. And that's where things get really complicated for her and really complicated for Japanese politics. It's an unusual state of affairs where so many of the minor parties are in play and could potentially be crucial to passing any legislation. And it's why, as she's just won this party vote and is on the cusp of making history as Japan's first prime minister, there are questions about how long is she going to last in both of those roles.
So can Sanae Takaichi right the ship?
Look, she's on the conservative side of the Liberal Democratic Party. There are much more conservative or hardline or nationalist. And so the pitch that Takaichi and her supporters have made is that she's going to be able to bring some of those voters who have drifted away from the LDP towards these upstart parties. She's going to be able to bring quite a few of them back. And it's over to her to prove that. The flip is, though, she lost to rivals who had much more appeal amongst Japan's big cities and amongst Japan's younger voters. And that's where all the polling shows she really struggles. So there is no perfect candidate for the LDP who can straddle both those worlds. They've tacked to her, and perhaps she's going to be able to arrest that decline in votes from the right of the party and bring people back in. But the danger for them is that she loses more from the party's left amongst its moderate voters. So, that's a real challenge she's got. And look, finally, a key thing to note about her is in this leadership tilt, she spoke often quite vaguely on a lot of topics. So on a whole bunch of policy issues, it's just really unclear, as a prime minister, how is she going to behave compared to, we know where she's been as someone who's been free of that office, but it's quite a different thing once she's the Japanese prime minister as to where she's going to land on a lot of these things.
Will Takaichi is described as a China hawk. Of course, Australia is concerned about China's growing military might and its apparent objectives in the Pacific. How is her election as party leader and probable prime minister likely to influence that dynamic?
She's long been a hardliner, or maybe you call her a China hawk, on relations with Beijing. Again, during the campaign, though, she spoke much more moderately about China. So even in her foreign policy positions, where she's often been quite loud and consistent up until this leadership contest, even there it's not quite clear how much of those positions she's well known for in Japanese public life, how much of those are going to endure in office. And I guess one of the things a lot of people are watching for clues on that are, who is she going to put into key posts? So we just have to wait and see on that. And again, it'll give us an indicator into how she's going to behave. Now, some of these questions we won't be left asking for long. She's going to be most likely becoming Japan's prime minister just before summit season. So she's expected to be at the ASEAN leaders meeting towards the end of October. That's in Malaysia. And then right after that, she's expected to host Donald Trump, the American president, in Tokyo, just before they both go to APEC, which is going to be in South Korea on the last day of October and then on to November 1st. So she's going to meet, at least on the sidelines, we don't know if she'll have a formal bilateral meeting, but she'll meet China's leader, Xi Jinping. So how that meeting with Xi goes, how she behaves in the meeting with Trump, how she goes with other regional leaders, all of those questions are going to be answered very soon by her on the global stage with all of us watching.
Coming up, what the elevation of Sanae Takaichi means for Australia. In August, Australia awarded a lucrative military contract to Japanese shipbuilder Mitsubishi Heavy Industries.
Well, Japan has won a fierce battle to build a new fleet of Australian warships, winning a $10 billion contract with the Albanese government.
Add to that a commitment to train Japanese troops alongside Australians and Americans in the top end, and you've got the makings of a strong geostrategic relationship. Just lastly, Will, you wrote for The Australian that this is Anthony Albanese's third Japanese counterpart since he was elected as Prime Minister in 2022. And that, of course, begs the question of what Sanae Takaichi means for Australia's bilateral relationship with Japan.
History shows us that the Australian-Japan relationship has been able to not only endure, but actually strengthen despite a lot of political instability. So in the Abe era, actually, Canberra was the source of instability. Shinzo Abe, when he was first elected, Julia Gillard was Australia's Prime Minister for a couple of months before Kevin Rudd returned, for a couple of months before Tony Abbott was elected, for a few years before Malcolm Turnbull came into power, for a couple more years before Scott Morrison did. So all through that, though, Japan and Australia really improved and more closely aligned their strategic relationship, working much more on shared foreign policy and security goals. What really united them was a shared concern about Beijing, about the increased capabilities of the People's Liberation Army and its more assertive behaviour in the region. Now, in the first Trump era, Washington's unreliability also became a shared concern between Tokyo and Canberra. And of course, it is again. So the strategic alignment that brings the two countries together, if anything, it's only intensified since then. So I think that however long this next Japanese Prime Minister lasts, I think that the relationship between Australia and Japan is just so strategically important. It's also economically important. I mean, Japan is Australia's second biggest economic market. All that said, though, it's not a new thing that we've got short-term Japanese prime ministers and that they're revolving within the LDP itself, going from one faction to another. A concerning thing for Australia is that the LDP's electoral popularity has fallen so much that there are questions about, is that pattern going to endure? If the LDP actually lost government and opposition came in, then the band of foreign policy positions really grows, and it's not clear that Australia-Japanese alignment would be quite so comfortable and natural as it has been throughout the LDP period. And the worst case scenario for Australia is that this is an unsuccessful prime ministership that even worsens the party's position within the Japanese electorate to such a point that the Japanese public goes for quite a different sort of a medley of other parties, and that they throw up some foreign policy positions that make that Australia-Japan relationship much less clear or makes working together much harder.
Will Glasgow is The Australian's North Asia correspondent. You can read all his reporting and analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au.